should also support the bill to the second reading. It's always curious to me when other parties in the House say that they support excellence in education. It's almost as if it's a sort of a novel thing to do. And of course all of us here in Parliament support excellence in education. I'm not so sure that this particular bill is going to enhance education standards dramatically. In some ways it's what's not in the bill, which is perhaps more important than what in fact is in the bill. This bill really tightens up a lot of the scrutiny around who can be close to our children and who can be around our children. I think it will give parents like myself, for example, some added confidence that my kids are going to be in school, are going to be safe, and that those people who are going to be around them, even though they are not necessarily going to be come in contact with those people in the course of their teaching duties, at least those people have been vetted. And for that reason I think this bill is important, and it is worthwhile supporting. It is also, as many other speakers have said, will tighten up the registration of teachers. When you have more teachers on the salary roll than there are registered teachers, one realises that there are a number of teachers out there who in fact are not registered, and I think that's important to bring that into account. So much has been made of the fact that this bill is really a modification of the Labor Bill of 2008, the Education Amendment Bill 2008, September 2008, and it's for that reason I think it was the reason for the degree of cooperation across the House, cooperation to make sure that this bill is in a form that both sides could be happy with. I mentioned when I began that I think that one of the issues about this bill is not so much what's in it, but in fact what dropped out of it. And I want to raise two particular issues. One was, and Calvin Davis mentioned this as well, is the issue of career guidance and counselling for careers, and obligating schools to have that service in place for students. There's probably no more important time, certainly in the last generation, for this sort of service to be offered to students. And this was not in the bill, but it was dropped from it. And this is what I want to speak on this, because right now this is one of the most important things as we enter 7.3% unemployment, 1 in 5 young people out of work, that we have an education system that caters for children, that caters for students to ensure that they are able to match their qualifications with the marketplace and what's out there in that marketplace. It's also what was not put in the bill. There was a number of other elements. One was that I thought would have been supported, as it went some way to promote and to encourage a better education system that, as I said before, all parties seem to want to support. One was to promote a school environment that supports the highest standards of education achievement for all students. Actively manage and monitor the performance of the principal. That didn't make it. Ensuring that the performance of the school's other staff is actively managed and monitored. These are issues around quality, they're issues around standards that I would have imagined that the government would have liked to have included in the bill. Particularly as they believe that national standards, as we've heard time and time again and every day in the House, is supposed to deliver that excellence that everybody wants. The question for me really is, and I just touch on this topic. My children went to British schools where they had these national standards, and where my children were tested every year in maths, English and science. Interestingly enough, science, because that seems to have dropped off the table. In an era when science and growing our R&D and innovation is probably the most important thing that we can do and to lift our prosperity, we've dropped science as being one of those critical issues on which this government believes that we should be testing. But the whole point about testing is that my kids, for a year of that testing, in their British school curriculum, all they did was tested English, maths, and science. At the end of that time, at the end of that year, they knew how to pass tests, but they didn't really have a much better understanding of what we're doing in an education system. And the following year, that was borne out because, in fact, those standards in many of the other areas, in history and in geography and many of the other areas which actually reinforced those very skills that they needed to learn, were dropped. Now, what's interesting about national standards to me is, and I taught for a short period of time, is that as a teacher...
Point of order.
I'm sorry to interrupt the member across there, Mr. Speaker, but we had a lot of discussion as a second reading on bits that aren't in this bill at all. There's nothing about national standards, and there's nothing about the two previous subjects that the member referred to. Could I ask that the member come to
the point is well made. In the series of debates that the House has around a bill, the tightest part of that debate is actually the second reading, where members are actually required to speak on the process, what happened in the Select Committee, adaptations, relevance, all of that sort of thing. I've been waiting patiently for the member to draw his comments, and I'd ask him now to speak about the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for your advice as a new member of this House, and particularly on the second reading.
The newest.
The newest on this side, yeah, not the newest in the House. Perhaps then I can in my final couple of minutes go back to the purpose of this bill, and as I said before, it is supported by the Labour Party, which put a lot of effort in making sure that the bill was improved through the performance of the Select Committee. The amendments that are coming through this bill will be to introduce information that will match the New Zealand Teachers Council and the Ministry of Education to identify individuals teaching in schools without registration. And as I said before, the fact that the payroll has many more teachers than there are teachers registered is some cause of concern, and enables those schools now to be able to check that in the course of being able to tighten up their performance. It also removes the requirement for all contractors to be police vetted, with a requirement for police to only vet those contractors who have or are likely to have unsupervised access to children at schools and early child education services. That too, I think, improves the performance of and the confidence that parents will have with their children at school. It proposes that the New Zealand Teachers Council will no longer provide a police vetting service, and schools and early childhood education services can apply directly to the New Zealand Police. And finally, Mr. Speaker, it proposes that the initial maximum 3-month suspension of a teacher's practising certificate or authority to teach will be amended so that the suspension can be reviewed after 3 months and extended for yet another 3 months if that is necessary. Once again, I believe that the Education Amendment Bill, with the corrections made by the Education and Science Select Committee, have done a good job in amending what was a much more narrow piece of legislation, and we will be supporting it at the second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.